Hello, welcome to DIY is my happy place. Today we are going to be making Ladybug Gnomes. They are so cute and so much fun to make. So let's have some fun. Today we are going to be making a Ladybug Gnome from Dollar Tree supplies. This was inspired, first of all, by this cute skirt that I found at the Dollar Tree. I made a bumblebee one, and now we are going to be making a Ladybug Gnome. I had this sign that was left over from my son's graduation a few years ago, and I never actually used it, and I never like to waste anything, so that is what I'm going to do with it. I'm going to turn it into a ladybug sign to go with my gnome. Now, the other thing that really inspired me was this ribbon that I found at the Dollar Tree, and I thought it looked like curly, permed hair, and it was perfect. So that's what we're going to start with. I always like the body of my gnomes to be made with either white or black ankle athletic socks. And I'd like to cut off the very top of it, the part that starts to bend. Now we're going to get us some straws that you get. They're balloon straws. And I use these for all kinds of things. And then I just put some duct tape, black duct tape on the outside. Now we're going to stuff our sock. And I'm going to have this be a standing gnome, so I like to keep it pretty lightweight. If it's going to be one that the gnome body is on the ground, then I'll put rice or something else on it. Now I'm using this stuffing that's from a pillow that's left over from a previous gnome that I made, and I never waste anything. So this is actually all from the Dollar Tree. Now here's my straw, and you want to use a good pair of scissors, but not your fabric scissors. We're just going to cut that in half, and these are going to be our legs. So we're going to poke our straws down into the cotton, and then we'll hot glue a generous amount. You want your legs that are going to be sticking up, so right now our gnome is upside down, and you want those to look kind of like chopsticks sticking out of rice bowl. And be generous with that hot glue. You definitely want to get a lot of hot glue in there, and then we're going to set it aside and let it completely cool. Now, let's talk about this cute little skirt. They do come pretty wrinkly, so you either need to iron it or throw it in the dryer with a wet towel in order to get the wrinkles out. And I'm actually going to do that after I cut my skirt into place. Now, you can hold on to the elastic that comes with it and use the elastic for your waist, or you can just cut it off, and I'll show you another way that we can use this fabric. I'm going to be using this black mesh that's lining on a different project. I don't even use it on my ladybug. So as you can see, I measure very precisely. Not. I just find a spot that looks like it's about the right length, and then I just start cutting along the dots, and they can show me exactly where the line should be. And I'll only use not even a third of this. I can make quite a few gnomes out of one skirt. I love doing projects where I can buy one thing and make 4 or 5 gnomes out of it. So that's what we're going to do with those skirts. Now I'm going to trim off the rest of this. Oops, got my little black mesh in there by accident, but that's okay. And this is going to be our skirt for our cute ladybug gnome. Now one thing, I went ahead and let the elastic just go. I'm going to make it gather so it looks like it has elastic, and I don't have to sit there and try to keep a hold of that elastic. So now, as you can see, it's quite a bit bigger around than our gnome is, and that's how I want it, because I want it to be able to gather up. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is make the wings that are going to go on the back of the gnome, and I just cut some circles. I did some big ones and some small ones, and I'll glue those on. And for this particular gnome, I only need the big ones, but while I'm at it, I usually always make things kind of in groups. I'll make a group of things so that I can use them for my next project. Okay, so I've got my cardboard that I cut into a circle, and you can either use a glue stick, or if you want it to be more solid, then the cement glue from the Dollar Tree works good. Now I wouldn't want to use the super glue here because this fabric is so thin it would just seep right through, and it's really pretty moist. Whereas the cement glue is thick, kind of like a paste. So that works a little bit better. And again, you can use a glue stick or the cement glue. I just really wanted to make sure that this was going to be solid, and I didn't want it to be bendable. Now I have granddaughters that like to play with these gnomes, so I wanted it to be able to hold up to a little bit of action. Now they're not play toys, of course, it's a decoration, but it, you know, I want to be able to handle it without it falling apart. So that's why I'm using my cement glue. And we'll just put this on here. Now, as you can see with this fabric, it doesn't matter if this part is ironed, because once you put that glue on, you can flatten it out and you will get all the wrinkles out. Only the skirt needs to be ironed and or put in the dryer. I actually just put it in the dryer this time. Okay, so we'll set that aside and let it dry. And actually, it feels a little bit tacky to me, so I think I'm going to put it on something where there can be air coming up underneath. So I'm just setting it on a mesh thing just so it will be able to dry underneath. Now I grab my pipe cleaners, which I always have pipe cleaners on hand, and then a styrofoam nose, which is the size of a ping pong ball. Now you can do different size of pantyhose to line your nose depending on what color you want your gnome to be. I've used white, I've used tan, I've used black, so it just really depends. The main body of the gnome is going to be black, so I wanted the nose to be a contrast, so I'm going to be using white this time for our ladybug. But this is totally a preference of however you'd like it. Now I'm going to wrap the hose around the styrofoam ball with my pipe cleaner. Now I'll set that aside, and I leave a tail so that I have a place to glue. Now I want the arms to be bendable, so I'm going to use some of these curlers and some black felt, and I get a piece of old plastic that I can run along these sides in order to let the hot glue catch. I want the hot glue to ooze out of the edge and then catch on that plastic so that there is a complete seam. This is how you make a perfect seam on the sleeves without having to sew. Okay, so depending on what type of gnome you're going to do is how long you want these arms. Now I know that I'm going to be gluing this on the very top of the head of the gnome because I'm going to have a hat up above it. And that's a good place to be able to glue your arms. So this needs to be pretty long. And it really, you want your arms longer than you might think. If you're going to be having the hair directly on the top of the head of the gnome and not have a hat, then these arms would be glued to the side rather than the top of the head. But I know I'm going to be using hats, so they're going to be glued up on top. Okay, now we'll come back to our cute little skirt. And, oh, I forgot to cut the arms in half while they're drying. And now we can get the body of our gnome back, and here are some cute shoes that I've made. And I'm going to do a full tutorial of how to make these shoes. This is a new technique that I have not shown in previous gnomes. Now you can use the techniques that I've shown before if you're another person that's coming back for a new look, or I will be updating gnome shoes on a up and coming tutorial. Okay, now we're going to glue our nose onto the body of the gnome. And again, it depends on where you glue this nose, depending on what type of gnome you're going to do. How long are the legs going to be? Are you putting a hat on top, or is it just going to be directly onto hair? That's how you decide where the nose is going to be. And because I know I'm putting a hat on top, I'm going to go ahead and glue this nose clear up on top. Now we're going to glue our arms and put a little round ball around it in order to be the hands. And you could use a piece of your fabric to make little mittens, or there's a lot of different ways that you can do the hands. But I really like the little decorative balls just to use for the round hands, so it looks kind of like Lego hands. And I put a piece of elastic around it to hold the felt together while it is gluing onto the ball. Now this silicone makeup applicator is the best thing to use for catching your hot glue and being able to get it absolutely precise. Now on my gnome arms, I generally like to put a bracelet on one side. That's kind of my go-to thing. I like to wear bracelets, and I like my gnomes to have bracelets, but of course I do 90% of my gnomes are girls, and I like to add a little extra something. Now this silicone paddle is so great. See how I could just wipe off the hot glue and it's ready to go again. Now, with the skirt, you want to put a dot right on the belly button so you can find the center of the skirt. And then I'm going to set this aside and let it dry, and then we'll keep working on it because I want that to be exactly in the middle there. Okay, so while I'm letting that dry, I'm going to go ahead and cut out my circles that I made previously, and they're drying nicely. And I actually made 2 big circles, 2 little circles, and the little circles I'm going to use on another project, but these big circles are going to be the perfect little wings on the back of our ladybug. Okay, so I'll set that aside, save my other little circles for later. Okay, now let's keep gluing. You notice that I'm always doing one thing and then moving on to something else and then coming back to it because I never want to sit there and just wait for the glue to dry. So I always like to work with 3 or 4 things at once, and so that it has time to dry. Now we're going to put a little dab of glue on the very small of the back, like what would be the middle of the back, and let that dry. And this is where we're going to keep going half and half and half and half on the skirt until it's gathered up evenly. And that's how we can get away without having to use elastic around the waist. Okay, now I'm going to gather up my little curly ribbon to look like a braid, and I love pipe cleaners to use for hair clips. And so I'm going to put a little bit. Now, I did notice that this has quite a bit of extra. I actually probably could have gotten away with this ribbon working on 2 gnomes, but I wasn't sure when I was first getting started, so we'll go ahead and do that. Okay, now once that glue's dried, we're going to do half and half again and add another little dab of glue. And so our skirt is starting to come together. Now our hat is going to be out of these snuggly, wonderful socks that I got from the Dollar Tree. Now I know that I make a lot of gnomes, so during the winter when they have a lot of socks, I gather up a bunch. And I love these black ones because they have a glittery sparkle to them, but it doesn't like leave glitter all over. I just love them. Okay, we're going to add some stuffing up in there, just some paper towels that can be molded. And then I've got my pom-pom here that I made previously. I always like to make pom-poms in advance, and I do have a tutorial of how to make these pom-poms, a no-fail pom-pom. Very easy, and I'll link it in the description below. Now I'm going to glue that onto my sock, and then I'll just set it aside until that's dried. And now I can come back to my little bracelet arm, and that's drying nicely, and things are starting to come together. Now, as you can see, these arms look really long, but it's going to be perfect when they're glued right on the very top of the head. So now I've got quite a bit of the skirt in position of where I want it, and now I'm going to use the elastic that was left over from the top of the athletic sock, and I'm going to wrap that around. I love using those elastic pieces for the belt on the gnomes. So I'm just going to make it so I don't see any of the tops of the skirt, and then I'll just add a little dot of glue all the way around to secure it into place. And that is how you make your skirt look so gathered without having to worry about having the perfect elastic or any kind of sewing. And again, if you have your silicone paddle handy, you can wipe off any excess glue that might come up and seep up in to where you can see it. Okay, she is coming along, and I just keep on gluing and tucking until that skirt is perfect. Isn't she cute? And see, these gnome shoes do stand on their own. Okay, now let's go ahead and start working on the belt. I didn't finish with the belt, but I love to add some extra glam, and I definitely pick up these jewel stickers for all different types of things, and I use every single pearl, every little gem that comes with them. I set them aside and I use them and reuse them, and I get the different colors, but they make such a fun, glamorous belt to just go around that elastic. And I have 3 or 4 different starts of these. I'm getting all the pieces together in order to make this cute little belt. Okay, now we're going to glue those arms to the very top of the head. Now this is the one time that you can't really just set it aside and let it dry, because they will just keep popping off. So you do have to kind of hold those arms into place. So I'm just going to hold those with my left hand, and I'll get everything else ready with my right so that it will be all set up. Now, here are some of the embellishments that I've made, and I have a previous video of how to do this. I came up with this idea on my own. I also have some table scatter for some of the flowers, but a lot of these flowers and ladybugs are made from, I've tried 3 different techniques actually, so, and each one works, and I also wanted to add some of the ladybugs and the flowers to my sign that I made. So the main thing that you need is just to pick up some, they call it dough, but it's like Play-Doh. You know, it's the dollar store's version of Play-Doh. Now the Play-Doh works. You can mold that very easily. Or they do come in a bag that's just called dough. Now this part, once it dries out, they can kind of tend to crack. So it's not the best of the best to use, but it's so easy to maneuver. So I just kind of let the bottom have a little place where it can crack when it dries. And then I just paint over them with some markers, red markers. But the very best technique is using the clay. Although it's the hardest to work with, it doesn't crack after you're done. And then the secret ingredient is to mix in Fixodent. And if you need more details, like I say, there will be a link below for a full tutorial of how to make that work. Now, the other thing that I do sometimes, if I don't have the exact color that I want for my bling, I will spray paint it whatever color I want. And I wanted to have some black stickered beads to use along the very bottom to look like lace going along the bottom of our gnome skirt. And so I have done all different colors of spraying, and the great part about it is you can, once it's dried, you can turn it into anything you want. The little tiny embellishments that you add can really make a difference. Look at the cute ladybug and the wings on her, curly hair made from ribbon, a sock for a hat, pom-poms that I made myself. I am just in love with her. All of these things you can get from Dollar Tree Supplies. And if you need more tutorials, I do have the pom-pom link below, and also other gnome videos of how to make standing gnomes. I hope you enjoyed our time today. Thank you so much. We had a blast making Ladybug Gnomes. Don't forget, there are free printables in a link below, and also some other how-to tutorial videos. You might want to check out this one right here. Or maybe you want to check out this one right here. I'll see you again soon.